And Jeff, in classic Jeff fashion, sent me a picture of the sunset from Oahu last night and told us good luck tomorrow. He hasn't missed one of these meetings in 32 years, and he just wanted to let you know that he's thinking of you over there on the beaches.
Mostly he's worried about what we'll say.
So I'm Jeremy Romer. I'm the assistant district fish biologist, as is Martine Reisman. And Martine is in charge of the raft stocking program. And so you'll be dealing a lot with her, dealt with her a lot last year. There are a lot of changes this year. Do you want me to go through those, or do you want to? You can correct me if I'm wrong. So there are a lot of things swirling around with ODFW in our district. And we'll start off with kind of projecting into the future a little bit. The Corps of Engineers for trout mitigation has 277,000 pounds allocated to the Willamette Valley on a typical year, and then in 2025 that will be reduced to 97,000 pounds, so roughly a 60% reduction in trout from the Corps of Engineers for 2025. We're not exactly sure how that's going to affect the McKenzie itself. We're working on that. ODFW's trying to, play the shell game and make sure that the McKenzie gets plenty of fish, but it probably won't be as many fish as you've seen in the past. Leaburg and McKenzie hatcheries will both be dewatered, probably starting in June, and that's going to change our stocking for this year quite a bit. We're going to have to move the raft stocking days to Thursday during a good portion of the year, because those fish are going to be held at Willamete Hatchery, and so they'll be coming over from Oakridge instead of coming from Leaburg. And so we're going to have to, because of the work schedule for the Willamette crew, we're going to have to accommodate them and move to Thursday. I was informed when I got here, we did not know about the closure for the Finn Rock boat ramp, and not sure quite how we're going to deal with that yet. I'm sure you guys have some ideas, and we'll be working with you to figure out a plan for loading fish and getting the same water stocked, but probably I think you guys had talked about starting up at Blue River and then loading fish there, coming down, and then not stocking fish until you hit Finn Rock. Along with the Thursday change, there's going to be more hand loading that has to happen too. So it's going to be, we're going to try and get some extra help out there to hand load fish, from nets as opposed to the tube that usually fills the boat. And that might be a little more challenging. Along with the dewatering, so the dewatering, like I said, is going to happen in June. So we've got to move the trout out. Not sure what we're going to do with the sturgeon that are in the show pond yet. And we'll be collecting our McKenzie brood stock at that same time for the Chinook and at the Leaburg sorter with no place to put them. Because usually we just run them, over a couple hundred yards to the hatchery and hold them there. And that's not going to be an option this year. So the plan now is to run them to Minto up on the North Sandy Am. And so it's going to be a lot of extra work. And some days at the sorter, some nights most nights we run until around midnight. And sometimes we only collect 3 fish, early in the year, 3 hatchery fish. We let the natural origin fish pass above the dam, and we don't want to be, running in the middle of the night 3 fish up to the North Sandy Am. So we're going to have to figure out some kind of holding apparatus. We'll be working with eWeb to figure that out. For additional trout information, we're trying an experimental new West Virginia stock of rainbow trout that is resistant to cold water disease. And last summer when we were doing our high lake stocking, we put some of those fish in along with our regular crane bows into Wahana, Malacqua, Scott Lakes, Irish Camp, and this spring we put some into the Row River Nature Park. We're looking at survivability, growth, and then catchability is what we're looking at. This summer we're going to go back in there, try to catch some of those fish and see if we catch them at roughly the same rates and figure out if that's going to be something we're interested in, either switching or mixing stocks in the future to those West Virginia fish. High Lakes backpack stocking is occurring this summer on July 12th and 13th at Willamete Hatchery, and on July 14th at Leaburg Hatchery. So if you have, any kids, grandkids, you need something to do on one of those days, we work with folks to make sure, we talk to people when they call in to volunteer. We have some lakes that are, way out there, really hard to get to. We have some that are super easy. So we kind of match up what your needs are with where we need to get fish and try to meld those together. And I think we're going to try and stage at the McKenzie River Discovery Center because Leaburg isn't going to have water. So it'd be a nice a draw to the Discovery Center to have people go up and tour, kind of get a look at what's going on up there, and then head out to the high lakes to stock some fish. So if you're interested in that, let Martine know. She coordinates that as well. Then we'll shift over to Chinook salmon this year. The spring Chinook run was actually pretty good for the natural origin fish, a little bit above what we've had, the past decade. But the hatchery fish didn't return quite as well as we had hoped. We put those fish out during the holiday farm fire about 5 months early, as young fish, smolts headed out. Well, not smolts then, but and they didn't survive very well. And so we were missing that whole 4-year-old age class of adults returning to the McKenzie. And we barely made broodstock for our Chinook this year, but we were able to do it. And this year, that cohort will be 5-year-olds. And the fish return in McKenzie primarily as 4 or 5-year-olds, and it kind of depends on the year which fish come back stronger, or it depends on ocean conditions. So we're hoping to have a better run this year, but we'll be missing that 5-year-old age class. And then the Dexter rebuild on the Middle Fork. So the boat ramp there is going to be shut down. Greg probably knows the timeline on that better than I do. They started breaking ground, I think, last week. And so that boat ramp is going to be shut down for a little while. Greg will talk about that probably.
Several years.
Yeah, years. So something to keep in mind. And then we had coho show up at Leaburg Dam for the first time this year ever. And it was actually on the last day that we were collecting broodstock from the trap there at the left bank fish sorter. And 2 giant coho bucks came in there, and we had some seasonals that had never seen coho before. And they were down in the hole and they started screaming and they were like, "What is this thing?" And Jeff runs down there in his boots and he's like, "That's a coho." And it was a very surprised look on his face. And we had 2 really big bucks in there, and they were beautiful fish. And then we opened up the banks, and so we pulled the grate on the right bank ladder and opened up the passage just to let fish go, because that's pretty much the end of the Chinook run. And through the cameras, we saw at least 50 coho go up above Leaburg Dam. Mm-hmm. So that was something interesting and unexpected. It's going to present some, it's a management wrinkle, I think, as Jeff puts it. And so we're thinking that we're probably gonna open up a fishery starting in October on those coho, if we can get an emergency opening on them. And yeah, hopefully that will add some opportunity for you folks out there. Might be kind of fun. And as far as what we're gonna do, we think we're gonna radio tag about at least 10 of them, 10 coho at the Leaburg Dam there, let them pass, and then follow them up and see where those fish are going in the basin, because we have no idea. And if any of you are interested in helping out, doing some radio tracking and figuring out where those coho are going, let us know. Martine and several of the hatchery folks, Shirley was involved in this too, during Halloween this year. The McKenzie community doesn't really have, door-to-door trick-or-treating opportunities for kids. So if you got kids or grandkids, Halloween, you can just bring them to the McKenzie River Discovery Center and Leaburg Hatchery. We started an event. They were kind of co-events, but they were different. The Discovery Center had the fire truck up there with several firefighters, and was that, I don't know, Spot the Fire Dog? Sparky. And so the kids seemed to love it. We got good participation. We handed out tons of candy, which I'm sure the parents were very grateful for. It was a really good event, and we were kind of surprised by the number of people who engaged with that. And there were some fun games, and everyone seemed to enjoy themselves. And so we decided we're going to continue to do that in subsequent years.
Yeah, we also had a raffle, so we raffled off some fishing rods and...
You want the microphone?
No, I don't. I can talk real loud. And Wade, one of your compatriots, donated a float trip, either whitewater or a fishing trip. So we did have someone win that, and it turned out to be a really, really good event. And I think everybody's really looking forward to coming back next year. So if anybody wants to come and participate and help out, we had a fish toss game. It was real fun. Backyard bass.
Martine and I dressed up as Mario and Luigi.
Any excuse for me to wear a mustache.
Mario and which one was Luigi?
I was a Luigi.
I'm Mario.
So Jeremy, could you say a bit more about the hatchery dewatering?
So the hatchery dewatering was directed by DEQ, and the hatchery was putting out water warmer than was acceptable. I don't know all the real ins and outs of it. And the only way to get around it was to shut the hatchery down when the water temperature reaches a certain degrees, or a certain temperature. Can't remember what the actual degree number is, but we looked back at the records, and it looks like it happens, mid to late June, and depending on the water year. But that's what we're planning for as far as shutdown. Not sure when it will come back online, and this should be. We're hoping to have the issues resolved in. We're hoping to only have an outage in 2024, but it may go through 2025, depending on how things shake out this year. So that's pretty much all I know. Does that answer your question? Okay.
So is it only the McKenzie area hatcheries?
Yeah, it's the hatcheries on the McKenzie River, so both McKenzie and Leaburg Hatchery.
But none others in the region?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Danny, do you have a question?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
So many questions.
I know this is a little bit off the subject, but I know you've done research on what happens to the Chinook when they get into the ocean and where their range is. Could you elaborate a little bit? Do they go to Alaska and spend a lot of time there?
So they do. They go to Alaska, up around the Bering Sea, and then come down through all of those fisheries, all the way back down. A lot of our fish from the McKenzie get caught in the lower Willamette. And, that's a lot of time that's what people forget, that the fish that we, produce in the McKenzie provide opportunities, all the way through those mixed fisheries coming down from Alaska all the way back here.
Because they're a main target fish, during the months of July and August in Alaska.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, they definitely do get caught all the way down.
Is there a chance you can take those sturgeon from the existing pond, put them over in the pond at the McKenzie River Discovery Center?
We have talked about that. That is an option that's on the table. We're not sure what they're going to do with them. We're not sure how sealed, once we drop the head gates or shut down the intake to the hatchery, we're not sure if there's going to be enough water back there for them or how many fish we're going to be able to support back there. We might only have to move part of them. I don't know if you guys know the general is what we call the big one in there. And we prefer not to have to move that one at least because they're real heavy and they don't like to be tickled. So yeah, we're hoping not to have to move them all, but that is an option that's on the table, is having some and moved over to the Discovery Center, and we've talked with Gene and Shirley about that. Bob?
So you're talking about a new hatchery stock from West Virginia. Are you going to keep the McKenzie stock with the Cape Cod stocks, which are like dry flies and?
Yeah, we don't know. That's why we're looking at the catchability in other places. So some of the ponds where it's a more controlled environment, the Cape Cods work really well in the McKenzie. I mean, we've been raising those fish for a really long time, but they do have some issues being raised, in the hatchery. And we would definitely do some catchability studies before we changed over. But there's nothing planned for the river itself yet. And if we did do that, we'd probably ask you guys to give us a hand, catch more fish than anybody else. So.
What about some of the big resident sea lions down in Oregon Falls? They're just destroying fish populations.
Yeah, so we do have our sea lion removal efforts going on down there. I think so the feds gave us permission or permitted it, and they do that they do it at some annual basis. I think it's every 5 years, and that's coming up again where they're going to reevaluate whether they're going to continue to do that or stop doing that. And I don't know if that's available online or not, but we do have numbers for the number of which species were removed annually since they started it, because we have to track that really closely.
Any idea how many resident sea lions are there?
But they're not really resident. So what they do is they just come up the river and they follow the fish.
Right.
So they are pretty transient, and any given year, you can have, when I first started with ODFW, I did a lot of the sea lion observation there at Willamette Falls. And I think we had maybe, like 5 different ones. And I know that has increased, but they also cruise up to Bonneville as well. So I think it depends on any given year how many seals or sea lions we're gonna have up there.
How many pounds of fish a day does one of those large sea lions eat roughly?
Surprisingly, one of our jobs was to basically sit on the corner and you watch and you record everything that you see, and sea lions are surprisingly unsuccessful. So we might see one get a fish, in a day. So rarely would you see like multiples, and I think a lot of people may have a misconception that they just eat the bellies. That's what they eat first, but they'll just flip over on their backs and they'll just eat the whole fish. So they're looking for an easy meal, which it's an easy meal right there at the falls, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's going to vary year to year, and the data is always there for the public to look at as well. You just have to do some digging, I think, to find it.
And if you want, you can send me an email, and I can get, if you have specific questions, I can send those to our marine mammal biologists, and they can actually get you those numbers.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they're always working on hazing as well. So even if we can't lethally remove them, there's always hazing efforts going on too.
Jeff?
Jeremy, has ODFW looked into any other funding alternatives for the trout when the corps doesn't, when they aren't going to cover all the funding for all the fish?
So we're trying to see what we can do in-house. You know, like I said, it really is a shell game. You know, you have to have hatchery space, you have to have, you know, people to feed them, feed the fish. And we're looking into some options, but I don't think we've looked at, you know, outside groups to help with funding yet.
And that would start in 2025, fewer pounds?
Yes, so a 60% reduction, essentially.
Two questions on size with those. One is early season right now, like in May, most of those fish that we catch are about that big. And in August, a lot of them are 14, 15, 16 inches, which is bigger than they need to be. Is there a way to have them fed in separate tanks to where the size is a little bit more even through the year? That's one question. Question two.
Okay.
Question two is, we used to get 3 fish per pound, and Jeff always kind of cheated on that, and they were still nice fish. But the numbers were a third bigger. And then when we went to Eastern Oregon and got those, the first year they were so dang small that the next year they went to 2 fish per pound. And when it came back to ODFW, he stayed with the 2 fish per pound, so we lost a third of our fish. I guess the question becomes then, if we're going to lose poundage, can we go back to 3 fish per pound and have a third more fish? And has that been discussed?
As far as I know, that has not been discussed. We did a pretty extensive research study. That was our tag reward study that we did in 2021, I think it was. But it was statewide, and what we found during that study, it was asking satisfaction, angler satisfaction, and throughout the state what we saw was that people would rather catch less fish but bigger fish, was pretty consistently what we found throughout the state. So yeah, I don't know. That's something that we could discuss for sure, and send, again, if you want to send us an email, we can talk about that for sure. About the growth, I mean, fish grow, the fish in the hatcheries, you know, we have a lot of things going on in there at the hatcheries, and we have to, you know, move fish in and out according to, you know, stocking schedules, those kind of things, different species.
So they aren't different tanks?
They're not currently. I mean, we keep them all on the same growth schedule right now for the stock trout. So yeah, I mean, if you had suggestions, send them to Jeff and we can certainly talk.
Jeff's always said that size depended on how much you feed them.
Yes.
So if you've got them in separate tanks and you feed the early season ones a little bit more and the late season a little bit less, then you solve the problem.
Potentially. I mean, that's a little bit more work on the hatchery folks, you know, keeping things going, keeping things separate. And there are, you know, other angling public out there too that do like to catch those bigger fish. So that's something to keep in mind.
They may like to catch fish though, and if it's 60% less fish, they may change their approach on it.
And that's not really what the research says. I mean, they said they would rather catch less fish and bigger fish.
78% of those surveyed would rather catch bigger fish than others.
Correct.
78%.
To the fish size thing, I talked to one of the, I don't remember who it was, one of the guys that actually feeds the fish. He said the water was so cold last spring, you know, specifically for last year, the water was so cold that they were feeding the fish as much as they could get them to eat. They were actually having fish die and they were getting them tested, and the fish were like having too much fat in their hearts and stuff because they couldn't metabolize all this stuff. So they were like, they were feeding them, trying to get them to grow as best they could, but the water was so bloody cold that it was like counteracting the food. So it
Yeah,
was,
and
the
that's
water temperature issue was a
That's one of
huge
the
issue
problems
last
up
year.
at McKenzie or up at Leaburg, because it is cold and they can't force feed them. So, you know, it is tough for those early season fish are gonna always be a little bit smaller, but they should be, you know, right around keeper size at least, you know.
And then the bigger fish, then I asked about the bigger fish, because we had, I mean, there were some stud fish later in the season last year. And, yeah, incredible. And so I kind of had that same question, and that was his answer was, well, finally finally they can metabolize all this food, and they're like, you know, they're too big, but they're bonus fish at that point. You know, those weren't costing us per pound, they just happen to be quite a bit bigger than they normally would just for that growing window and that growing season. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's very true. Go ahead.
I almost don't want the ODF&W answer, I want your personal answer because I know you're knowledgeable. Based on surveys and data in the lower Willamette, Tualatin, Calpooia, Yamhill, Saniam, and anything we see about this coho and why they've reached this far up to here, and then secondary, is there a concern of diseases as there was in summer steelhead with the fall salmon, with the fall coho?
So we're not really concerned with disease. We haven't seen, I mean, they're really pretty fish. Coho are non-native to above Willamette Falls. And so when
Since 1980?
Since they put the fish ladder in there at Willamette Falls.
And then they began.
And then they started coming up on their own. So we've stocked them. I mean, we tried to stock them everywhere for a while.
When did that fish ladder was when, the 60s?
I think it was the 70s, but I'm not positive on that.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. And you know, so we had several different stocks that we were stocking throughout the upper Willamette Basin, and we didn't see any returns really on those in the 80s at all. And I think the 80s when we were stocking them, and then they started getting it figured out, and it's really cyclical. You know, they have a 3-year cycle, and this year, you know, kind of blew the record out of the water as far as we had 40,000 come over the falls this year, and so that's pretty incredible. And usually, I mean, 20,000's a decent run, and a lot of those are going up the North Saniam. So you know, the mouth of Saniam is a good spot to fish in there, and this year was kind of an anomaly.
Do you think there's a correlation with the Hernandez ruling and the warmer temperature, the lower water, warmer temperatures, and them seeking a cooler water to spawn?
I don't know. I mean, my personal feeling on that one is I don't think so, but maybe. And I think 11,000 of those were jacks. And so we may be seeing a really big run next year too. I'm not sure if they track, you know, the same as Chinook do, as far as, you know, jacks to the following year. But there's potential. I mean, the coho seem to be doing really well and spreading out. And like I say, they were, you know, not native. The only real native species we had above Willamette Falls were the springers and winter steelhead. So it's a new issue, and for anglers, it's an incredible opportunity. People were crushing them this year. So
Were those all, they must have all been unclipped, is that right? Or-
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, unless we stocked them, which I'm not even sure. You know, I know the Sandy stocks a bunch, but I think those are clipped. But these were all wild fish up here.
Earlier today, I touched on coho stocking programs hatchery programs in Oregon. Do you know how many coho hatchery stocking programs there are in Oregon?
I don't, right off the top of my head.
More than 10, less than 10?
I don't know. No, because I mean, we got a lot of stocking going on, like in Eastern Oregon. The tribes and stuff are trying to reintroduce coho to, like, you know, the Lostine system and things like that too. So the tribes have their own stocking programs in some places, and then ODFW has
Do you know if the North Mechanicum is privately funded entirely, or does the state have some involvement in that?
I have no idea. I can look at, I mean, if you guys have questions, I can get back to you. Go ahead, Steve.
What do we know about the migration route for coho
So,
in the ocean?
So, part of the reason for the good recovery is the focus on the Oregon plan for salmon and watersheds. And the coho don't make that huge migration up to the Bering Sea and stuff like that. They kind of stay more localized, and so, and relatively close to shore. And so we kind of have more control as a state agency over, a lot of what happens there, especially on our coastal systems. And so they don't range nearly the way that the Chinook do.
It might sense that they might be, by that more confined migration, they're avoiding that Asian fishery.
Yes.
And the Russian fishery
Yep.
as well, so, which our spring Chinook do not. And I think that would follow a pattern. It appears that the steelhead and the rogue and the Klamath and tend to stay closer to continental waters rather than taking that dangerous route up north.
Yeah, and with the steelhead, we're just kind of getting some insights as to where they go in the ocean, and it doesn't seem like they follow the patterns of, the Chinook or the coho. And for a long time, nobody really knew where they went, and they're kind of more service oriented in the ocean. And actually, Lori Whitecamp is a really good resource. If you ever have a chance to hear her speak, she's amazing, and she goes out on those ocean trawling vessels and everything, and she's in charge of putting all that data together and presenting, and she does a really good job of linking that to ocean conditions, climate change, ocean temperatures, like all that
Is she an
stuff.
ODF person?
Is she ODFW or is she NOAA?
Noah.
She is. And yeah, she's an incredible resource. And maybe I can find a presentation that she has given and ask her for or maybe have her come speak to everybody, because she's amazing.
There was a relatively recent My ODFW podcast that I listened to where he spoke at length about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it was super interesting. Anybody that's interested should try to find that one. It was that
There you go.
biologist Lori Whitecamp.
Lori Whitecamp, yeah, she's great. And was that on the Beaver podcast? Is that what that was?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good call. Maybe I'll look that up and send a link to who's president. Ethan, got it.
You got a question?
Back there.
How many go up the Middle Fork with Ghost Fork?
So the Middle Fork, there at Dexter, we had, so the coho come in later, and we would normally shut the trap down there when we stopped collecting spring Chinook. We had them leave it open this year,
Oh, that's right, you said that.
just to see if any coho came into the Middle Fork system as high up as Dexter.
Right.
And we never caught any up there. We actually kind of expected it, but we never caught any coho in the Dexter trap. In the back?
I've heard pretty grapevine about the summer steelhead program in the future, the summer steelhead program in the basin here. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the returns haven't been great, as you all know. As a matter of fact, at Leaburg this year, I think we caught 6 at the Leaburg Dam sorter there this year, and that's really pretty abysmal. And the Corps has cut funding for the summer steelhead program in the Middle Fork, so the town fishery, things like that. ODFW has eggs on hand. We're trying to figure out whether we can or wish to continue, because they're you raise those fish for 2 years and they can go out as pretty large smolts, and it's a lot of resources that we spend on raising those fish, and we just haven't got the returns on them like we had been previously. and like we had hoped. So that's kind of where it stands. It's not funded. The steelhead program isn't funded, but we're still in the process of seeing if we can try to make it happen.
Has it also been defunded in the McKenzie, the summer steelhead program?
I'm not sure on that one. I think it has.
Yeah, I thought it was basin-wide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah.
When does that run out? Like when?
So we were instructed not to take brood stock or take eggs from the brood this year coming in because they weren't going to be paid for. And I mean, for eggs, it doesn't take, much to hold them. But when we start raising them, once we make a decision, and that'll probably happen in May, we'll either let what we've got go or find a place to raise them.
So this year would technically have planted fish, next year would have planted fish, the following year wouldn't have any planted fish as it stands now?
I think this year is the last
It'll be the last year with
stocking,
planted
yeah.
fish.
Out of curiosity, how many adult summer steelhead did you gather at the Dexter facility?
Ooh, I don't know that one right off the top of my head.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else? You want to go with an in?